July 18th, 2026. Recorded live from the English Valley's History Center. Here's Jackie.
Hello, my name is Jackie Geringer McDermott. We've got a first today. I'm doing the program without my regular audience, Lou Geringer and Dan Best, as they're out working the golf tournament at Knowledge today for the firemen. This diary was written by Libby Wade. She was my dad's great aunt, and her full name was Mary Elizabeth Claypool Wade. She was 76 years old in 1950. She lived in a house on East Oak Street in North English, Iowa with her son, Russell Wade. Here's a picture of Lib with the children of her brother Benton, Jaunty, Otis, Louise, and Bertha, and their maiden name was Claypool. November 27th, 1950. A nice bright day, not quite so cold. I called Mrs. Bauer over and she did some work for me. Cleaned the rooms upstairs and carried stuff from the back room. Cans to the shed, fruit jars to the cellar. Also brought up a supply of canned food. I cooked the chicken too and defrosted the fridge. Anna Weingarten Bauer was a 69-year-old widow who lived in the house just south of Lib on Southeast Street. In later years, she would be joined in this house by her daughter-in-law, Ellen Bauer, the widow of Wendell Bauer. Ellen and Wendell's children were Carol Bauer and Norma Bauer. My faithful listener, Randy Bauer, and his brothers are the great-grandchildren of Anna Bauer. For the longest time, I thought when I was reading these diaries the first time, I thought that it was Ellen Bauer that Lib was speaking of when she called the woman Mrs. Bauer, until I later learned that Ellen moved to the house later, so it was Anna she was referring to in the earlier years. Stella stopped in after dinner. Mary Ann was here a while, and Maud was in a few minutes. I washed my sweater and mended the sleeve. Russell went to Williamsburg with Mildred in the evening. Stella Wallace was a widowed neighbor and the mother of Lena Wallace Wade, Lib's daughter-in-law. Mary Newhouse is a neighbor who takes in boarders and also runs some errands for Lib. Maud Claypool is a neighbor and the wife of Lib's nephew, Ray Claypool. Russell Wade is Lib's youngest son, and she lives in his house with him. Mildred Reese is Russell's girlfriend, shown here in her later years. Today's diary entry reminds me that people in those days had way fewer items in their wardrobes than we do now. Lib is talking about mending and washing her sweater, and it was likely the only sweater she owned. That and a few dresses and a winter coat were likely all the clothes she owned. November 28th, 1950. I want to make this book last until December. Lib did finish up November of 1950 in this book. However, there are no more books until 1954 in the collection that Glenn and Hazel Cobb donated to the English Valley's History Center. If you know of the existence of any other diaries of Lib Wade, we would love to copy them to use for our broadcasts. It is not so cold today, cloudy. I've been so anxious to hear from Dale, so I rang Kinross and talked to his mother. She said he had been in the hospital for some time, but was out now. I understood her to say the ship was torpedoed. A man next to Dale was killed, and Dale had both legs injured. So at noon, Russell brought me a letter from Dale, written November 18th. He seemed to think we know of his injury, said one leg bothers him. A piece of shrapnel still in the leg near his knee, but they don't want to operate again until he was back in the States, so he expects to be back before very long. His wife and baby are with her father in Richmond, California. Dale Bishop was a former neighbor who was serving in the military. Lib writes regularly to Dale. Lib might have submitted this article to the North English Record. Dale Bishop injured. USS Missouri hit. Dale Bishop writes friends here that he has been in the hospital for several weeks from leg wounds received September 10th in the Korean War. Dale was serving aboard the big battleship Missouri when the Big Mo was torpedoed September 10th. Dale has shrapnel in one of his legs near the knee and will undergo another operation when he reaches the States. Mrs. Bishop and baby are with her father at Richmond, California. The SS booster class meets today at Neva Morse's. In the evening, Hattie and her Aunt Jenny Harper stopped in. Were on their way to lodge. Evelyn was here too a while. Russell and Bruce went away someplace in the evening. The Sunday school booster class from the Christian church, I believe, was being hosted by Neva Morse, who is third from the left in this picture, and my mother Ethelene Keller is to her right. Hattie Newberry Killian is Lib's friend over on Boland Avenue, who runs a boarding house. Jenny Harper is the widow of Hattie's uncle Clyde Harper. She is on the back left in this picture. Evelyn Wade Kurtz is Lib's married granddaughter, and she also belongs to the Rebecca Lodge that meets in the upstairs of the Locker building, a half a block west of Lib's house. Bruce Warner is Russell's friend and also his boss at the Home Lumber Company, a block from their house. November 29th, 1950. Not quite so cold. A pretty nice day. I didn't feel very well this AM. My foot hurt and I didn't sleep well last night. Russell cut my toenails and maybe that made me a little nervous. I get along anyway. When we had dinner just ready, Mrs. Huff came. She had eaten at home and rode over with Mr. Huff. After a while, Bertha came, and John, and Elsie Miller, Mrs. Bauer, and Jenny. I had quite a number in, but not all at one time. Mary Ann also stopped a minute. Lib's visitors today were Alice Simmons Huff, who was 67 years old in 1950. She was a sister to Bessie Moffett and Daisy Doherty. She was still living in the late 1960s across the street from us up on Summit Street in the south part of North English. And John and Bertha Geringer, Lib's niece, and my grandparents, who live north of town in the Yankee Point area. And Elsie Miller, an old friend from out in the Green Valley area. Lib's neighbor, Anna Bauer. And Jenny Wade, shown here with her family, she's Lib's daughter-in-law, and she lives a block away on East Clark Street. Bertha gave me Marvin's new address. She said Louise and Johnny were down one day last week. Johnny was at home at corn husking time and helped. Marvin Geringer was my uncle and Lib's great nephew. Louise Claypool Long was Bertha's sister, Lib's niece, and the grandmother of my faithful listener, Mary Wade from Cedar Rapids. Johnny Long, or John Wendell Long, who was named after Wendell Bauer, was the son of Louise and John Long and was Lib's great nephew also. Orville Geringer's children are sick. The baby has a ruptured appendix and Frank has the mumps. Orville Geringer was the nephew of my grandfather, John Geringer. He was raised by his grandmother, Tracy Wallace, who was Lib's friend, after his mother, Ada Welch Geringer, passed away when he was a baby. Orville was married to Mary Ann Fritz, the sister of my Aunt Dorothy Geringer. The two sisters were married to cousins, Orville Geringer and Donald Geringer. The baby was Jerry Geringer, shown on the right in this picture. Tim Geringer on the left was not born yet. The oldest boy, Frank, or Frankie Carl Geringer, who was named after his step-great-grandpa Frank Wallace and his grandpa Carl Geringer. Frankie Carl had the mumps. Frank died in a motor vehicle accident when he was just 14 years old. Hazel's boy Bobby is sick, had convulsions last evening, is better today. Hazel Cobb, who hosted her family for Thanksgiving, is Lib's granddaughter, who is married to Glenn Cobb and lives on a farm west of town. Bobby Cobb was the little boy that Hazel and Glenn Cobb adopted. November 30th, 1950. Winston Churchill is 76 today. The weather here is about like yesterday. Temperature 27 degrees this morning. I did the work up and got dinner, but no Russell came. Must have gone to Cedar Rapids and didn't tell me. Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II. Libby gets her news daily from the radio. Russell works at the Home Lumber Company a block away and comes home every day for lunch that Lib prepares. He sometimes goes to Cedar Rapids to pick up supplies. Minnie Zilmer came over in the PM. She expects Mrs. Kuhneman to come stay with her, perhaps tomorrow, as Hubertine is going home soon. Minnie Zilmer is the neighbor across the street who does nursing care for others. According to this article from the North English Record, Mrs. Hubertine Williamson left for her home in Quinando, New Mexico Sunday. She had spent the past month here with her mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Kuhneman. Walters were worried about Jimmy. He got hold of some rat poison, and they're afraid he swallowed some. Claudia said he didn't, but they forced him to vomit. Is okay, they think. Walter, or Bud Wade, is Lib's grandson who lives around the block. Frida Wade is his wife. Claudia is their young daughter. And Jimmy Wade is their young son. In the back of this book, Lib has written November 18th, 1950, same ad. I don't know what that means. And the address of her young friend in the service on September 4th, 1950, Dale L. Bishop, SN, 6th Division, USS Missouri, BB 63, Cara FPO, San Francisco, California. And the address of her friend Jim Floring, Cara VA Hospital, Castle Point, New York. And her neighbor Hattie's address when she was in the hospital, Mrs. Hattie Killian, Iowa City, Iowa, Cara's FCUI Hospital, 442, 4th floor. And the last notation is Elmina Teresa Zilmer, Minnie, May 15th, 1890, June 4th, 1891. That is her neighbor across the street, Minnie Zilmer. And that is the end of the 1950 diary. The English Valley's History Center has been operating on Main Street in North English since 2006. The center operates a museum, monthly programming, a community coffee shop, and provides meeting spaces for groups and organizations. These include family and class reunions, celebrations, gatherings, and club meetings. The History Center offers all of its services by donations only. It does not have annual memberships like many other historical organizations and relies largely on private and community donations. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and donations are tax deductible. Your support of the History Center would help continue its operations and provide a valuable community asset. Please send donations to the English Valley's History Center, P.O. Box 70, North English, Iowa 52316. And our feature story today, Carter, Iowa and Yankee Point, Part 3. Armilla Carter and her husband Franklin Pettibone. You might remember that my dad's great-great-grandma, Anna Bramer Carter, who later married William Raines, came to Iowa County in the 1850s and settled. Where Grandma Raines settled was at a farm at 2378 360th Street, which is at the top of the hill and then east from Ballard's Bridge. Around Ballard's Bridge was the site of Carter, Iowa. This house on the top of the hill and to the east is now owned by a descendant of Grandma Raines's son, David Carter, and his name is Keith West. The Yankee Point School, which was originally across the road, is the garage at this farm now. The children of Anna Bramer Carter Raines and her first husband, Benjamin Carter, were William, Stephen, Oscar, Jacob, David, and their only girl, Armilla Carter. And I didn't put the picture of Armilla in there. I swear, sometimes I'm getting old. Armilla was named after her grandmother, Armilla Birch Carter, the wife of Jedediah Carter from New York State. Armilla was born in New York and then lived in Illinois and came to Iowa, where her mother and stepfather and little brothers were living in 1855 with her husband, Franklin Pettibone, and their first 3 children. She married Franklin Pettibone in Illinois. Frank was originally from New York State. Note that Franklin is pretty young in this picture, but he has a weird cut to his beard that makes him look older. Armilla and Frank's 7 children were Benjamin F., Mary Ann, David, Ellen or Ella, Byron, Oscar Leroy Carter or OLC Pettibone, and Geneva. I only have these 3 small pictures, and this is Byron and his youngest sister Geneva, and their older sister Mary is on top. After Armilla died, Frank Pettibone married his widowed daughter-in-law, Ellen Warner Pettibone, and Ellen died the next year in childbirth. Later, Frank married Phoebe Harding Carter, the widow of Armilla's brother Jacob Carter. Franklin Pettibone was a well-respected businessman in the community. Frank committed suicide in 1910 at nearly 81 years of age as his health was failing badly. Frank and his 2 wives, Armilla and Ellen, are all buried under a big stone at Yankee Point Cemetery. Benjamin and Byron are buried nearby. And 3rd wife, Phoebe, is buried by her first husband, Jacob Carter. Franklin and Armilla's oldest son, Benjamin F., who I don't have a picture of, was married to Ellen Warner, the daughter of Sally Bramer and Josiah Warner. So Ellen was Armilla's cousin. Benjamin only lived to be 26 years old when he committed suicide. After his mother, Armilla, passed away 9 years after Benjamin, her widowed husband, Frank Pettibone, married Ellen. I read a newspaper article somewhere that said he prayed about it and then took Ellen to Missouri to marry her. Ellen died in childbirth at the age of 32 that next year, along with the baby. Her 10-year-old daughter, Myrtle Edith, was then raised east of North English by Frank Warner, shown in this picture, and his wife, Alvaretta or Allie Warner, shown on the right in this picture. And just to note, these are Carolyn Warner's, Elwood's great-grandparents. I don't know, one of those, great. It's hard to tell when it gets this far back. Myrtle Edith went to college back east in the Virginias and met her husband there. Myrtle Edith was usually called Edith, and she lived for 94 years. She was married to David Curtis Brubaker. The Brubakers were parents of 8 children and are buried in Grinnell. Their great-granddaughter, Pam Brubaker, sent me an extensive genealogy. My faithful listener, Mike McClellan, is also one of their descendants. Mike McClellan is a cousin on his mother's side to my friend Helen Kirkpatrick Schwietert of Colesburg, Iowa, and Lake Placid, Florida. And there's a picture of Mabel Edith Pettibone and her husband, David Curtis Brubaker. Frank and Armilla's oldest girl was Mary Ann, who married Jerome or Jerry Palmer. And this beautiful picture of them came courtesy from Dave Jackson. The following comes from Dave Jackson's Hinkletown book. Jerome, or Jerry Palmer, was a Civil War veteran from Foote who was born near Rutland, Vermont on April 11, 1843. He came to Iowa with his parents as a young boy and located near Millersburg, Iowa. At the outbreak of the Civil War, he was clerking in southern Missouri. The sentiment there toward the war was not to his liking, so he packed his things and came home. On July 24, 1862, he enlisted at Marengo, Iowa in Company B, the 28th Iowa Volunteer Infantry. He served with that company as a fifer until the war was over, discharged on July 21, 1865, when he returned to Iowa and took up residence near Hinkletown, Foote, P.O. in southeast Iowa County. Palmer worked at Harmon Hinkle's sawmill, along with Franklin Pettibone, a partner in Hinkle's sawmill operation. On April 31st, 1871, Jerome Palmer was married to Mary Ann Pettibone, Franklin's daughter. Having associated with Harmon Hinkle, Palmer was one of several businessmen at Hinkletown who relocated with Hinkle to Kyoto, and in January 1872 built the first general merchandising establishment for Hinkle, known as the Pioneer Store of Hinkler and Littler. Hinkle gave Palmer some sound advice that he should build and operate a hardware store in the new town, which he did. Just this week, Dave Jackson said the following about Jerome Palmer. He was in the Civil War, 28th Iowa Volunteer Infantry, with several other area men, including Clark Mahana. His whole story and photos are in the Hinkletown book, page 38 to 41. Jerome Palmer looked like he could kick some serious butt and was a stellar soldier, and as his etching in the drawer at Shenandoah shows, he was wholeheartedly patriotic. Dave was referring to this drawer where Jerome Palmer etched his name out in Virginia when he was in the Civil War. And there's an interesting story in the book about how this made it back to Iowa, the picture made it back to Iowa. Jerome was also a member of the Farmers Lodge with William Carter, several of the Carters, and Benjamin F. Pettibone. He helped at the Hinkletown Brickyard and Sawmill and also went with Harmon Hinkle to Kyoto in February and March of 1872 and helped build Hinkle's new store. Jerome did a lot of the work. And then he built a hardware store in Kyoto, and for some time there was also an optician. Mary Ann Pettibone was born near Pontiac, Illinois, on April 30th, 1853, the daughter of Franklin and Armilla Pettibone. She came with her parents to Iowa in 1855 and located in Iowa County, where she was united in marriage to Jerome Palmer. They had 5 children: Armilla, or Millie Cole of Pella, Iowa; Jerome Rush, who was called Rush, of Jacksonville, Florida; Weber Tallman Palmer of Chicago, who was a dentist; Mrs. Molly Karras of Orlando, Florida; and Victor Hugo Palmer of Kyoto. Mr. and Mrs. Palmer moved to Kyoto in the fall of 1872 and reared their family there until their retirement with their advancing years. Jerome Palmer passed away in 1926 at Orlando, Florida. Molly Karras' grandson, Jerome Palmer Karras Jr., or Jerry Karras, was in correspondence with Dave Jackson on the Hinkletown project. The family has Jerome Palmer swords, shown here in this picture, from the Civil War, and they also furnished us with genealogical data. Frank and Armilla's next son, David Pettibone, married Mary Eveline or Eva Johnson. David was a farmer and moved his family to Tobias in Saline County, Nebraska, and then to Benton County, Oregon, and finally to Idaho with their daughter's family. David Pettibone lived to be 90 years old, and his wife Eva died on her 93rd birthday. Their children were Benjamin E. Pettibone, who lived less than 2 years and is buried at Yankee Point Cemetery near North English; Clifford Pettibone; Mabel Pettibone; Willis Adams, that's her whole name, Mabel Pettibone Willis Adams, who lived to be 101 years old; Elda Betts Way, who lived to be 92, and Jenny Meyer, who lived to be 93 or 94, and their daughter Frances McClellan, shown here, who died at age 27 of influenza in 1919. The next child of Franklin and Armilla Pettibone was Ellen or Ella Pettibone, who married George Washington or G.W. Wallace. G.W. and Ella were farmers in Iowa County, Iowa. G.W. was born in Round Head, Ohio, and his parents were William Wallace and Lydia Moore. The Wallaces and the Moores were friends with the Claypool families, and members of all 3 families came to settle in Fillmore Township in Iowa County, Iowa, around the time of the Civil War. The children of Ellen and G.W. Wallace were Frank, twins Lydia and Leroy, known as Roy, William, Laura Ethel, known as Ethel, and John Wallace. Lydia had already passed away when this picture was taken, and they are from left: William Wallace, John R. Wallace, Ethel Mick, Frank Wallace, and Roy Wallace. Frank Wallace, shown in this picture on the left, is my step great-grandpa, as he was married to Anna Lou Tracy, or Tracy Kelly Geringer, after her first husband, James Riley Geringer, died. Tracy and Frank Wallace raised their grandson, Orville Geringer, in their home in North English. Frank was a farmer and president of the English Valley Cooperative Creamery Association Board of Directors. He died in the same day in 1947 as his uncle, Oscar Leroy Carter Pettibone, or OLC Pettibone. Lydia Wallace King lived to be 21 years old. Her twin, Leroy Gilbert, or Roy Wallace, was the husband of Stella Markwell. They were farmers who moved to town in the East End of North English. Their children included Lena Wallace, who married Warner Mike Wade, the son of Lib Wade; Nellie Wallace Hahn, the wife of Elviner Ham Hahn and the mother of Sandra Shetler from South English, and her two sisters, Janice and Nancy. Sandra's daughter, Laura Lee Fisher, is one of my faithful listeners. And Lena and Nellie's brothers were Marl Wallace, Allie Wallace, Bernie Wallace, shown here with his wife Mary, who lived in New Mexico, and Armin Wallace, who lived in Washington and Oregon, and his wife Aline, who was a half-sister to Glenn and Milo Cobb. The next child of G.W. and Ella Wallace was William S.B. Wallace, who was a Williamsburg attorney and served as the Iowa County attorney. He was married to Grace Schomler from Shellsburg. His son was William or Billy Wallace. They also raised Treva Wallace, the daughter of John Wallace. And then came Laura Ethel, or Ethel Wallace Mick, who lived in Hedrick and had daughters Madge and May. And finally, John Wallace, shown in this picture, who was married to Ora Stover from North English, who died in his early 30s, and his second wife, Mary Ellen Bucher, who was the sister of Glenn Bucher of North English. John had 9 children and was a farmer near Beltrami, Minnesota. Byron Esby Pettibone, who married Emma Hanna, is the next child of Frank and Armilla Pettibone. Emma was the daughter of prominent citizens Clark Mahanna and Sophia Mahanna, who lived at the house at 132 West Clark Street in North English. We think Clark Street might even be named for Clark. Byron and Emma were married in 1881 in North English. Byron and Emma had 3 children: Milton Pettibone, Augusta Sophia or Gussie Pettibone Riddle, and Winifred Fern or Winnie Pettibone Hostetler. The oldest 2 children were born in North English. Then the family moved to Tobias, Nebraska, where Byron's brother, David, was a farmer. Winnie was born in 1887. That December, Byron had been ill for a while and seemed better. He walked outside and died of a heart attack the day after Christmas. Byron was brought back to North English and buried at Yankee Point Cemetery. Emma brought the children back to North English, where she became a carpet weaver, and the 3 children graduated from high school. Milton Pettibone went to Creighton Dental College to become a dentist and later practiced in Nebraska. Emma and the girls moved to Des Moines so they could further their education. Winnie went to Drake to college and became a teacher. She married and had 2 boys, Bruce and Byron Hostetler. The family moved further west later. Gussie also went to Drake and taught school for a couple years before she married. Gussie is buried in Washington State, and Winnie is buried in Billings, Montana. Their mother, Emma Mahanna Pettibone, is buried in Idaho. Gussie's granddaughter, Carolyn Scott from California, was very interested in genealogy, and we corresponded a lot through email back in the 2000s. And here's a picture of Clark Mahanna's wife, Sophia, and Emma Pettibone on the upper right, and Gussie Riddle and her daughter. And here's a picture of Ruth and Esther, both of Gussie's daughters. My faithful listener, Carrie Mahana Boone from Florida, is interested in Mahana genealogy and has put some of these pictures on Ancestry.com. And here's a picture of Emma Mahana Pettibone in her later years. Oscar Leroy Carter Pettibone, who married Lucy or Lou Claypool, was the next child of Frank and Armilla Pettibone. OLC, or Oz Pettibone, shown here when he was younger, was a farmer and lived in this house near North English at Yankee Point. His wife, Lou Claypool, was the daughter of Lib Wade's Uncle Samuel Claypool. In this picture are, from the left, OLC, Armilla, Glenn, and Lou. Armilla married Charles Ballard, who is in the back row on the right side of this picture with the big Ballard family. Armilla and Charlie had 2 children. Grace, who married Harold Wilhite, and her brother, Leroy Ballard. Grace was the mother of my faithful listener, Sharon Hagan from Williamsburg. Armilla's brother, Glenn Pettibone, was married to Cora McCombs, and they lived in the stucco house at the corner of East Oak Street and Boland Avenue when I was walking to school in the olden days. The last child of Frank and Armilla Pettibone was Geneva Pettibone, who married William Burns. Geneva and William had 7 children and moved to Winnipeg, Canada, almost 800 miles away from home. I read a newspaper article that said that Geneva brought her boys back to visit at her parents' house, which would have been Frank Pettibone and his 3rd wife, Phoebe Harding Carter Pettibone. Also, in the notice about Frank Pettibone's funeral, the newspaper said that the funeral would be held when Geneva arrived in Iowa. Their 7 children were Carrie Blanche, Bertha, Bessie Hazel, Frank William, Marvel, Floyd, and Milo. Geneva died in 1912 at the age of 43. Her husband then remarried a woman named Agnes, and they had a little girl they named Agnes Geneva. Frank Pettibone's grandson, Frank William Burns, was a World War I hero and casualty. Frank was serving in the Canadian military in 1916 when he disappeared after a battle on the front lines in France. His name is inscribed on a Canadian national monument in France. Correspondence. Mark Claypool from Sigourney said, Jackie, the research today is just outstanding, and I love seeing pictures of my grandparents and my great-uncles. You never cease to amaze me with your work. Pam Kavanaugh Shield from Cedar Rapids said, thank you, Jackie, for helping us relive memories from the past in our hometown, North English. I never tire of your broadcast, your wealth of information. I heard from Shirley Claypool Cochran in Mountain Home, Arkansas. We are grateful for the time we got to spend with you last year. Please give our best to everyone at the English Valley's History Center. We so enjoy the work you do there and making us all feel part of the community. Your podcasts bring us all back home. Proud of you. You make us proud of our North English roots. Vicki Johnson from California writes, regarding the broadcast with the Pool Girls. Hi, Jackie. For some reason, I didn't see this broadcast until today, which is July 13th. I watched it. I enjoyed it. Oh, how I love seeing my grandpa. It is very typical of Vic Van Dyke. Thank you so much. The next alumni luncheon will be at the Main Street Pub and Grub on August 31st. Please contact Alice Stramer or Linda Carter for seating. Programs. The next program at the English Valley's History Center will be tomorrow, July 19th at 2 p.m. Dr. Alan Hogue will be presenting Farming on the Oxbow. All programs are free of charge and treats are provided. There is a free will donation. We also invite you all to visit next Saturday with us after the parade. We'll be here from noon until 5. We want to see everybody show up, and we had a great time last year, and I hope we do this year too. And remember all the Fun Days activities. They're posted on the internet. Here's a picture of our Fletcher Major from Cat Eye Construction working on the signs for the Smoky Road Trail. Shown here are Councilman Lou Geringer, Sherry Moffitt, Fletcher Mazer, Mayor Dan Stroman, and Dave Jackson from the History Center. And here is the shelter house on the trail, completed by Isaac Frazier and the Scouts. Please plan to attend the dedication of the Smoky Road Trail at 5:30 p.m. on July 24th during North English Fun Days. We are also interested in learning about historical English Valley's items you might wish to donate to the History Center. Please contact Dave Jackson, Scott Romine, or any board member to donate. And that's it. I'll see y'all next week for the big days at the History Center.
And that's a wrap. Thanks, Jackie.